Hello, Photo 130 online students. We're at the end of week one. If you were familiar with the schedule at this point, you know that week one is basically set up to make sure everyone can get access to the correct software equipment. Some people are enrolling or coming off of the wait list into the class, so they're getting caught up as well. And make sure that everybody can get signed into the websites that we'll be using this semester. What we didn't end up covering this week was the critique form discussion, and upon further insight, I think that'll be better covered once we get a little bit closer to having an actual project due. At this point, however, the majority of you should have been able to get logged into the Widen Collective website. Again, that's the website we're going to be using to upload both our photo and our video projects. I also ask that you take a look initially at the introduction to the YouTube channel, and right now we have 18 videos out there specifically for the online sections. As you guys know, I'll be running weekly, and I try and keep them under 15-minute video discussions in MP4 format that I'll be posting in the news section on D2L. And we've been taking this first week to make sure that everyone has access to the necessary tools, equipment, and software for the class. Next week, you can see on our schedule, we have information to talk about on the exposure triangle, camera mechanics, as well as required project settings for the individual projects that are coming up for photo. Those videos coming up will be posted this Monday. What I typically like to do is get through my Monday in-class session, so I make sure that I have all the required information to share with you guys. What we'll be working on next week is taking a self-portrait, and that'll include a few different things and discoveries on your camera equipment if you're not that familiar with it. But don't panic, it's not something you need to work on over the weekend to get done. That's something that we have open for next week to work on. We'll also be having a discussion on shutter speed and aperture, as those are the first two actual photo projects. You can see those in red. Those are the due dates indicated for the online class. I think we can easily have the projects due on Sunday evenings instead of we see the second day of class on Wednesday or Thursday. This is just a reference guide to see where the on-campus students have their schedules split up, so we can kind of follow along in the same path. Another reason that I'm doing this last kind of end of week follow-up video is to discuss anything that I had happen to come up during the week, obviously after I posted the first introduction video for you guys. And of course there were some things that came up that I wanted to make sure we took some notes in class, and we can't necessarily do that virtually. So what I've done, I'm going to go ahead and open those up really quick. I have out here, this is called Weekend Camera Exploration again, so we don't have any necessarily homework for this weekend, but some things that you can do on your own time. Again, you guys are virtual students, so you're able to take out your cameras and experiment with them a bit as compared to when we're in class. Typically, those students wait till Monday or Wednesday or Tuesday, Thursday, depending on their section. So you see, over the weekend, I said spend some time finding out where to access some of these buttons on your camera, even if you're not sure what they do just yet. Next week, we're specifically going to be going over the items in bold. That is the exposure triangle settings of ISO, f-stop, and shutter speed. But if we want to look through here, I think some important things and to get you going right off the bat, setting that top dial, that's that round dial on the top of your camera. You're going to set that to manual. It is going to remain on manual for the duration of the course. Almost all of your cameras are going to come with additional settings on that top dial. Those are all considered auto settings, where the camera does something for you and thinks, chooses the appropriate setting according to the actual camera's choices. At least these three specific things you're going to be choosing for all of your projects: the ISO, the f-stop, and the shutter speed. And again, if that sounds like a foreign language to you still, do not worry about it. We're going to be discussing this in detail next week. Number 5 I have listed on here, find out where to access, and if you access it, change the internal clock on your camera. We had the discussion in class about how this is going to help the organization of your photos a lot. If you end up getting the Adobe Suite, it comes with a program called Bridge. I think that becomes really, really helpful. I guess even if you don't use that, what it does is if you have the internal clock set correctly, so if I take a picture today at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, within the metadata that's hidden there, it's going to tell me it was taken at 5. So when I go through to sort through the 300 pictures I take over the weekend, they're in, timed order, which again will make your life a lot easier. Some cameras by default don't have the correct internal clock time, and some are left. I know the resources like that are at the library on campus. Occasionally a couple of the cameras are set to 1/1 of 2011, or they may be set to a future date that hasn't happened. So figure out where that is within your menu and set the internal clock. Number 6, something that, again, we can't control whether or not you do it, but I do think it's extremely helpful. The LCD brightness. Almost all of your DSLR cameras are going to have an LCD screen on the very back. I would go within the menu and find a good midpoint if you have the LCD brightness turned way down to save some battery, or if you pumped it all the way up. Why this is going to affect your overall photos is that since you'll be choosing the ISO, the f-stop, and the shutter speed, you may be over or under compensating for your exposure. So you could be incorrectly exposing your photos based on how bright the screen is. That's something that I think you should set. Again, find the midpoint on that. The same thing when it comes to your laptop. I know I'm guilty of working on projects at 2 o'clock in the morning with my screen turned, or the brightness of my screen turned way down. Take a look at your laptop, at least when you're working on the photo projects, and find that midpoint where it's not extremely bright and not extremely dark. I promise you it will make a big difference when you're making judgment calls for any sort of editing that you're doing. Number 7, color space. That's also within the menu of your camera. Go ahead and set that to Adobe RGB. You're likely only going to have 2 options. Choose this one. All right, number 8. Setting the image quality to camera raw. If you have a Canon, the actual file type is going to be a .cr2. If you have a Nikon, it's going to be a .nef. If you have a Sony, .arw. If you have another spin-off camera, it likely has its own proprietary suffix for the raw quality. This is the highest quality photograph that you can put together, and something that will be really helpful as we're going through the editing process within Photoshop. You will never select, at least for this course, a JPEG image or TIFF. Those are not suitable to meet the curriculum requirements for our projects that we're working on. So if you see something that says fine or low when it comes to the image quality, you know that you're on the wrong page. Do not select those. Some of your cameras in the image quality is going to give you the option to have both a RAW as well as a JPEG image. I don't think that's really necessary. For me, I look at it, it creates 2 files. It gives you a really high quality and then kind of the standard one that'd be suitable for posting to social media. I think more often than not, it confuses people because you end up, again, you have 2 files that look exactly the same except one's high quality, one's low quality. And say for space saving as well as for organization, I end up just shooting with the raw images. Number 9, white balance. That's something that we actually don't mind if you set to auto on your camera. That's going to be possibly one of the only things that I recommend is possible to set to auto. It's a very easy change in the Camera Raw plugin that we'll be looking at on Photoshop once everyone has that available to them. But white balance, you'll find that, take a look to see where you can actually access that on your menu. Scrolling down a little bit further, see the power save timer for the LCD screen. You can go ahead and adjust that for the time. It may not be so pertinent as we're shooting photo right now, but it definitely will become something that you want to look at when we get into video. A lot of the cameras have a 30-second timeout. Basically, if your camera hasn't been touched for 30 seconds and the LCD screen has been on, it turns it off to save you some battery. I typically keep mine around 4 minutes. That means I never come back to the back of my camera with a darkened screen. It always displays my information, so it takes a picture that stays up there. That's something that you can manually change. Again, that'll be in the menu. I think default again is 30 seconds. You'll see that there's a lot of other options. Choose what works for you and how you're shooting. Most of you are also going to have the option or ability to place your name within the metadata of your camera. That's located in your menu. They're all located in different spots. But if you can find out where to put that, it may be labeled as copyright information. And that's, again, where you'd put your, I'll call it a digital watermark that you don't see, with the exception of looking at the metadata later of your file. Most of you are also going to have a function button that is on the side of your camera. I know if I'm holding my camera I'm looking at the back of it, my function button's on the left side so I can access it with my left index finger. A lot of times that works as a shortcut to doing something else. Some of your cameras are going to give you the option to set what that shortcut does, which is really, really nice if you're working with a specific feature, or in the future you find that you specifically like to shoot certain types of photographs with styles. So if your camera has a function button, typically it's an FN, figure out where that is at and what it does, and if you can set it to something. Even if you're not setting it right now, I think it's important to know where it's located on there. Last but not least, there's also a grid display option. This will become really helpful when you start talking a little bit next week about composition as well and the rule of thirds. That grid display, most cameras at least have the ability to have what I'll call it a landscape style tic-tac-toe board that you can place on there, and it helps when you're figuring out where to place your elements in your composition. If you have the option for a grid display, I'd recommend turning that on. So this is not an end-all be-all list of things that change, but I think that's important stuff to experiment with when you have some spare time over the weekend instead of waiting till next week to look at it. What we did talk about a little bit in my face-to-face sessions were kind of the introduction to the self-portrait project, which is coming up as well. We'll be completing this next week. You can begin experimenting now. It is not something that will be graded based on the critique form, on aesthetics, and technical qualities. This is a process to make sure, one, you're able to shoot in camera raw with your camera, you're able to upload it into the appropriate software, make whatever conversions are necessary, save your 2 individual file types, and then go through the process of getting those 2 files correctly up onto the website. Much like how our exercises work, this is a test run before you start handing in final projects. I think it's important to test it first before we go into handing in something worth full credit. So it is essentially graded, or you're rather given credit for the correct completion of the process. And again, something we're doing next week. You don't have to worry about doing this over the weekend. Something that's not on our list up here, as it just came to me, might be nice to check out where you have a timer on your camera. Not necessarily the power save timer, but the timer when it comes to, let's say if you're taking a self-portrait and you want to set the timer to 15 seconds to give you some time to get in front of the camera. That could be a helpful thing to figure out where it's at for now and then for the future. All right, so we went through this. This is already actually posted to the D2L homepage over in the news section. We see that if I scroll on down right here, it's called Weekend Camera Exploration.docs. It's down here at the bottom. You see that these are where our other 2 videos are located as well. Earlier in the week, I also posted some information on my camera model suggestions. This came from, having a couple years of students ask me, like, what should I buy if I don't have anything? If you haven't purchased something, or if you have something right now when you're looking to upgrade later, what I did is I based these off of the raw files that were posted out on our website over the last 2 years. I just blindly chose the ones that have been unedited but look like they had the highest quality to begin with. And then I kind of devised and went through the listing of the type of cameras. So this is kind of my comprehensive list. There are definitely a lot of other great cameras available. This just happened to be the ones that were favorites or favorited out of students over the last year. So, all right, well, this concludes the wrap-up video for the week. I think I'm going to start making these standards as well because it, again, helps cap up what we didn't get a chance to cover on the first day video and things that I covered in my face-to-face sessions. I want to make sure you guys get a handle on as well. Look forward to viewing the videos out on Monday when you start talking about that additional information. Take the weekend to cover the information that's on the weekend camera exploration document. Again, I think that's really helpful. And then we'll get into the mix of it next week. Have a great weekend.